Hello my dear children of class 12 science. Today again we do continue with the same chapter that we were doing in the last two classes, that is nuclear fusion and nuclear fusion. And today we complete this chapter. Okay, and to start today's class, we start with the topic that is called nuclear reactor. A nuclear reactor, also called atomic pile or also called a nuclear power plant. Okay, now this is a device, as I said in the last class also, works on the principle of nuclear fission. Okay, nuclear what? Fission. But under what reaction? Under control chain reaction. Under control chain reaction. Now this device has number of parts and this device has a certain construction. So in today's class we deal with the construction of this nuclear reactor, because in the last class, if you see the last YouTube video, we had discussed your different part of what? Nuclear reactor. Now taking that different part of nuclear reactor, we now try to understand the construction of nuclear reactor and how this nuclear reactor work. Okay, and it is used for the production of electricity, or it is even used for the production of other particle. That means this nuclear reactor has number of uses. Now basically this nuclear reactor is one of the type of nuclear reactor, one of the type of device, okay, consisting of large number of uranium rods. So there are the uranium rods. So let me show you with the help of diagram. So these rods, you can see these rods are the uranium rod. These rods are uranium rod. These are the what rod? Uranium rods. Now this uranium rod is act as a fuel. Act as a what? Fuel. And what fuel we call? Nuclear fuel. Nuclear what? Fuel. So it is a fissionable material. This uranium act as a nuclear fuel and act as a what? Fissionable material to be used for the fission process. For the fission process to take place. And commonly, if you see, we are using uranium rod, but other than uranium, like we use uranium 235. But other than this uranium 235, we can use uranium 238, 238. Even we use plutonium 239. These are the most commonly used uranium rod or nuclear fuel that can be used in a nuclear fusion reaction, in a nuclear reactor. And children, if you look at this diagram, these rods, okay, these rods are placed in a calculated geometrical lattice, means calculated geometrical distance, okay, between the other rods. And there are the rods, we can see the control rods. These two rods are called control rods. Okay, in a nuclear reactor, these two rods are called control rods. And along with the control rod, there are the rods, okay, made up of graphite or heavy water, and this rod are nothing but the moderator. So there are the blocks which are used, and these blocks which you can see are called moderator. Moderator. So when we keep a fuel, a nuclear fuel, which is a uranium rod, okay, it is always placed, okay, in a what? Calculated geometrical distance, okay, between the what? Moderator block. You can see these are the moderator block. These blocks are called what? Moderator blocks. Okay, and even there is a rod which has inserted in a nuclear reactor, and these rods are called control rods. And if you look at these control rods, these control rods are so inserted in the gap between these rods, okay, so that this control rod can be raised or lowered between the uranium rod whenever what? Necessary. Okay, wherever not necessary. And the whole nuclear reactor, if you see, the whole nuclear reactor is surrounded by a shield, and this shield is called concrete shield. So this is a wall, erect wall like that, then this shield is called concrete shield. Concrete what? Shield. Now the actual operation of this reactor, okay, started always by pulling out these control rods so that they do not what? Absorb any neutrons. Okay, they could not absorb what? Any neutrons, because we have learned in the last YouTube video also that control rods are basically a rod made up of what? Cadmium or boron. Cadmium or boron are the material which is used for making what? Control rods. And these rods are used to control the fission rate in the reactor. The fission rate of the reactor, and the main part of this control rod is it has the ability, this control rod have the ability to capture the slow neutrons, has the ability to capture what neutrons? Slow neutrons, okay, to control the chain reaction for becoming violent, for becoming what violent, and the rods of cadmium and boron are always inserted in the hole of the reactor. There are the small hole of the reactor, okay, so that it can insert into the hole of the reactor up to desired length, okay, so that this control rod can capture the neutrons, and what neutrons? Slow neutrons, okay, and even control the rate of reaction, and even control the rate of fission reaction in the reactor. Because as I said already, cadmium and boron are the good absorber of what neutrons? Slow neutrons. But to start the reaction, to start this nuclear reactor, we always need to pull out these control rods. So when you start pulling out the control rods, okay, then what happens? The reaction will start. Okay, once you pull out the control rod, so that this control rod do not absorb many neutrons, slow neutrons, then the reaction start. Because in the nuclear reactor, okay, some amount of slow neutrons are always present in the nuclear reactor. Some amount of slow neutrons are always present in a nuclear reactor. So that what happens? This slow neutron will start fusioning, okay, fusioning with the what? Start bombarding with the uranium rod, okay, with the rod? Uranium rod. So once the slow neutron start bombarding with the uranium rod, then what will produce? Two or more fast neutrons will emit for fission of the reactor. That means in every fission reaction, okay, as I said, how many? 2 of 3 fast neutrons are produced, and these neutrons are repeatedly strike. Whatever neutrons, fast neutrons are emitted, these neutrons are repeatedly strikes the moderator. These are the moderator blocks. Strike with the moderator block. And these moderator blocks, the neutron which strike with the moderator block, okay, makes the motor helps to slow down the neutrons. That means moderator block helps to slow down the fast neutrons. That's why, as I said last time in the last YouTube video also, what is the main function of moderator block? Moderator, it slows down the neutrons to a certain energies, and this slowdown part is always happens by colliding with these fast neutrons repeatedly with the moderator block. Okay, due to the repeated collision with the moderator block, okay, these fast neutrons will be slowed down by the moderator block. Now once the reaction start, okay, now when number of slow neutrons start bombarding with the uranium fuel, okay, uranium rod, okay, as a fuel, okay, then the reaction occurs like a reaction? Chain reaction. That means the chain reaction of fission is started. Okay, so once the reaction starts, the increasing number of neutrons, okay, the fast neutron is controlled by pushing this rod, known as what rod? Control rods. So children, just try to understand how to start the reaction. The reaction can be started by pulling out this rod, but once the reaction starts, then we need to again push the control rod into the nuclear reactor. So once you push the control rod into the reactor, then what happens? This control rod controls the rate of reaction, okay, by absorbing slow neutrons. By absorbing slow neutrons. And who helps to slow down the neutrons coming out with a high speed? That is moderator block. Therefore, the energy produced, okay, is kept under control to avoid any explosion or violation takes place in the nuclear reactor. And this particular nuclear reactor exactly works under control chain reaction. What reaction? Control chain reaction. Okay. Now children, even you know that when this nuclear reactor is used under control chain reaction, the energy which is liberated is a large amount of energy. So the huge amount of energy which is liberated is basically in the form of heat. Therefore, the energy released inside the reactor in the form of heat is actually removed by coolant. Used by what? Removed by coolant. And for that, we can use any coolant as a coolant. Okay, so in this case, we can use some coolant out there. So we put some gas like say carbon dioxide. So we can use carbon dioxide as a coolant in the nuclear reactor. We can use water also. Okay, so we can use carbon dioxide as a coolant. So this part is filled with carbon dioxide, and this carbon dioxide, as I said, is act as a what? Coolant. Now, what is the main function of coolant? To absorb the heat, large amount of heat generated inside the what? Nuclear reactor, and this heat will be removed by this coolant. Now, this coolant, like carbon dioxide gas, okay, is pumped through the pump called coolant pump. This is called coolant pump. So, children, this is your coolant pump. So, coolant, like carbon dioxide gas, is pumped through the reactor, okay, through this pump called coolant pump, in order to carry away the heat that is generated by the fission, by the what? Fission of uranium nuclei. Okay, so this hot carbon dioxide as a coolant which absorb large amount of heat inside the nuclear reactor, okay, and this heat, okay, this heat has to be passed through the exchanger, and this is called heat exchanger. So there is a device called heat exchanger. So this is a heat exchanger. So this part is called what? Heat exchanger. So this heat, through heat exchanger, the hot carbon dioxide which as a coolant, okay, which absorb large amount of heat in the nuclear reactor, can pass through this exchanger called heat exchanger. That means through this what will basically pass? The coolant, that is hot carbon dioxide gas, which pass through this heat exchanger. So it passed this way. So the gas, carbon dioxide gas, is passed through this pump called coolant pump. But as soon as this pump, through this pump, okay, the carbon dioxide gas like coolant pass through this nuclear reactor, this carbon dioxide start absorbing large amount of heat, and that absorbed heat, okay, by this carbon dioxide pass through this pump called heat exchanger, through this channel called what? Heat exchanger. Now, in order to remove this heat, okay, through this heat exchanger, we basically supply a water through this end inlet, that is called cold water. We supply which water? Cold water outer. And this cold water, as you know, water is a good high speed heat capacity. This can even absorb large amount of heat even at very low temperature also. Okay, so when we supply cold water, okay, through this heat exchanger to this heat exchanger, okay, then this cold water absorb that heat passing through this heat exchanger, okay, and convert this water in the form of what? Steam. Convert this water in the form of steam, and that steam will pass out from this end, and this is the outlet. This is the outlet part of this end, and from this outlet, what will come out? Steam will come out. What will come out? Steam will come out. So as far as I said just now, that this carbon dioxide, the hot carbon dioxide, which can pass through this heat exchanger and convert this cold water into steam, and that steam will come out from this end. And this steam is used, children, this steam is now used, okay, to drive turbines, okay, to drive what? Turbines for generating electricity. That means with the help of this nuclear reactor, we can even generate electricity also, okay, because this steam can rotate the turbines, okay, and once the turbine rotate, okay, then it will have to even generate what? Electricity. That's why out of many uses of nuclear reactor, one of the most commonly used use of this nuclear reactor is to generate what? Electricity. So with the help of nuclear reactor or thermal power plant or atomic pile, we can even generate what? Electricity also. Now children, we will discuss some application of this nuclear reactor. Now this nuclear reactor find many application, okay, in our day-to-day life, but there are very few applications that I want to discuss, and one of the most common use of application, as I said, is for the generation of electricity. Generation of what? Energy, and basically this electrical energy. That means the energy, excuse me, the energy produced in a nuclear reactor is used to run electric generator also. Okay, electric what? Generator. That's why nuclear reactor is converted into nuclear energy. In the nuclear reactor get converted into what energy also? Electrical energy. So nuclear energy, nuclear what? Energy, okay, nuclear energy in a what? In a nuclear reactor. In a nuclear reactor get converted into what energy? Get converted get converted into what energy? Electrical energy. So as I said already, one of the use of nuclear reactor is to generate electricity in the form of energy. Okay, that's why it is used in power station also. So nuclear reactor is also used in power station to generate electricity on a large scale, with which actually runs what? Industries also. Okay, which runs what? Industry also. Now, another use or application of this nuclear reactor is for the production of neutron beam. Neutron what? Beam. The fast moving neutrons, as you know, it emitted in a fusion nuclear reactor, okay, by the fission of this uranium-92-235, okay, is usually get converting into what? A fine beam. Okay, that means these fast neutrons, okay, make them to converge into a fine beam, okay, and when they make them into convert into fine beam, then some artificial disintegration of some other element can be studied. So the production of this fine neutron beam, okay, in a nuclear reactor, this neutron beam, production of the fine neutron beam, is also used for the study of artificial disintegration of other element. Means there are the certain elements which can be disintegrated by the use of neutrons. Disintegrate means it can be split into, it can be break into other element, and that can also be studied by the use of what? Neutron beam. Okay, fast neutron beam, and this neutron beam which produced in a nuclear reactor, as I said, it is used for artificial disintegration of other element. So this is also one of the use of nuclear reactor. So another use of nuclear reactor is for the production of neutron beam. Now we have number 3. Okay, number 3 is nuclear reactor is also used for the production of artificial radioisotopes. You know, isotopes means the element which have same atomic number but different mass number. Okay, now radioisotope means the isotopes of element whose atomic number is less than 82, okay, which behaves as radioactive elements. That means from that element, what will emit it? Alpha ray, beta ray, gamma ray will emit it. Okay. Now for the production of artificial radioisotopes, also we use this nuclear reactor, because artificial radioactive isotopes of many elements can be easily produced by the nuclear reactor. So for this, the element is always placed in a nuclear reactor. So element is placed in a nuclear reactor, and we bombard with the fast neutrons. Means when fast neutron is emitted in the nuclear reactor, this fast neutron is allowed to bombard with the element of the element inside the nuclear reactor. Okay, thus these radioisotopes are utilized in medicines, biology, agriculture, industry, and some scientific discoveries also. That means, because you know that radioisotopes are those isotopes of element, okay, which is used for medical purpose also, it is used for biological purpose, agriculture purpose, and on. Okay, that's why the production of this artificial radioisotopes, okay, the isotopes which cannot be produced naturally, means which can be produced only by the artificially, can also be done with the help of nuclear reactor. That's why nuclear reactor is also used for the production of artificial radioisotopes. Now we have a last use of application of nuclear reactor, and this nuclear reactor is also used for the production of another fissionable material, okay, that is plutonium, Pu-239, and this plutonium Pu-239 is better fissionable than uranium, and it is more economical to use as compared to what? Uranium-235. Okay, because uranium-235 is rarely used, okay, because we cannot find this everywhere, it will not be available and is very costly. But plutonium-239 is very much cheap compared to what? Uranium also, and it is much available as compared to what? And compared to uranium-235, and it is much better fissionable, okay, than uranium also. That's why the production of plutonium, another another fissionable material, can be done with the help of this nuclear reactor. Okay, that means with the help of nuclear reactor we can produce another fissionable material, that is called plutonium also. Okay, so these are the applications of nuclear reactor. But children, one thing I want to tell you, that if you see this nuclear reactor, this whole device is covered by this thick concrete wall. Okay, concrete shield wall. As I said, this is called concrete shield, and this shield is completely made up of lead. Lead, one of the metal. Okay, it's highly stable, and from where the radiation will usually not emit. It will have to stop the radiation. Okay, now this is actually in order to protect the people who work under the nuclear reactor from the intense ray that also emit inside the nuclear reactor. So children, remember this, inside the nuclear reactor, not only the heat will produce, some of the rays, intense ray, highly intense ray like gamma ray, beta ray, they can also produce. Okay, and this ray, if it exposed to a human body for a long time, the people may die also. Okay, or may get injured also. So in order to protect the people working inside the nuclear reactor, this whole nuclear reactor is completely covered by a thick wall, erect wall, you can see all over, and this wall is made up by concrete shield, and this is basically made of what? Lead. So these are the construction part of nuclear reactor, and even I explained the application of nuclear reactor.